everyone. Welcome to Scoring for Sustainability, a food recovery network partnership with Gillette Stadium, Food Recovery Network, and Hellmann's Mayonnaise. I'd like to give a quick disclaimer that we are recording this webinar, and this is a partnership with Food Waste Prevention Week. Next slide, please. In this slide, I'm just going to discuss what we'll be talking about today, our table of contents. We have a little intro into the groups that will be talking: Hellmann's Mayonnaise, Food Recovery Network, and Gillette Stadium. We have representatives from all three of those groups here with us. We're going to be focusing on a joint activation that we took part in on December 1st, 2024 for one of our home football games. And a few of the things that we'll be talking about in this joint activation are going to be the logistics, the impact of the activation, and our learnings and takeaways. At the very end, we'll have some questions and answers. We'll be discussing amongst ourselves, but please feel free to ask your own questions, and we'd love the opportunity to talk to you. Next slide. In this slide here, we're going to be just quickly introducing ourselves, who we are, so when you hear our voices, it doesn't come as a surprise to you. From Food Recovery Network, I'd like to welcome Sarah and Julia, if you'd like to give a quick hello to the group.
Hi, I'm Sarah.
Hi, everyone, I'm Julia.
From Gillette Stadium, myself, I'm Catherine, and my colleague, Dina.
Hi, everybody.
And from Hellmann's Mayonnaise, we'll be hearing a brief video and just a few slides from our corporate sponsorship member, Heather. Next slide.
So just a real quick overview of what food recovery is. It's an immediate action that helps combat climate change, supports the environment, and can help companies reach their sustainability goals. It works wonderfully when people work in partnership, and a lot of our presentation today is going to be focused on that. Next slide. So just to tell you a little bit about Food Recovery Network, our mission is to fight food waste and feed people. We aim to recover enough surplus food to feed everyone experiencing hunger in the United States. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And then, of course, we were founded in 2011 at the University of Maryland in College Park. But since then, we have a vast network. We have about 8,000 student leaders and system partners across the United States. We have donated in excess of 19.1 million meals. We have over 200 student chapters across the country. And then, 7,450 metric tons of CO2 emissions have been prevented from going into the atmosphere because of the work that we do. Of course, there are some other wonderful highlights as to the work that we've done since 2011 in this slide. But let's go to the next one. I'll tell you a little bit about what we focus on. So FRN's mission focus, we really start with food waste and recovery. And through that, we help to mitigate climate change, and we feed people who are hungry in the communities that we serve. All of that is driven by student leadership. We are the largest student-led organization that recovers surplus food in order to fight hunger. And let me just tell you really quickly, we do this mission work in about 4 different kinds of programs. We have college student chapters. We also do elementary school produce distribution. We support community fridges. And then, of course, business and event food recovery, which is what we're going to be talking about today. And next slide.
Awesome. So in this slide, we're just giving a quick overview of our sustainability commitment here at Gillette Stadium. You'll also see Craft Sports and Entertainment on the slide. That's the organization that oversees Gillette Stadium. So they kind of go hand in hand here, but just a quick overview to show how focused we are on sustainability over the years, throughout the lifetime of the stadium, but especially over the past couple years, really getting some recognition in terms of sustainability program here. So most recently, or to start us off here, in March 2024, Gillette Stadium achieved LEED certification. For those who are maybe not familiar with the term, it stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. And we were able to earn LEED Gold certification, which was really amazing. As a FIFA host venue in 2026, all venues are required to get at least LEED Silver, but we were able to surpass. And then a few months later, we were selected as one of the 10 winners of Front Office Sports' 2024 Most Sustainable Award, powered by Sports Innovation Lab. So there was a couple different venues and teams that were awarded that, and we were really fortunate to be one of those 10. And then last but not least, we received or earned ISO 20221 certification last year, and that's the Sustainable Event Management System certification. And we were the first Major League Soccer organization to achieve this. And as part of the certification, we created a sustainability policy with 6 guiding pillars for our sustainability program. And a lot of those come into play, as you'll see as we dive network and Hellmann's. A lot of the different pillars come into play, especially the community engagement one. Next slide, please. In this, we're gonna just hear a little bit from Hellmann's. They weren't able to join us live, but Heather from Hellmann's has a quick overview to give us some insight into the initiative here.
Hi everyone, my name is Heather Torkel and I'm an Associate Brand Manager on the Hellmann's brand team. I'm excited to share a little today about Hellmann's role in bringing together 2 of our partners, Gillette Stadium and the Food Recovery Network, for this impactful food recovery. They'll each share how and why they executed this food recovery. You might be wondering, what does Hellmann's have to do with food waste? And how did we end up playing a role alongside the Food Recovery Network and Gillette Stadium? At Hellmann's, our purpose is both simple and connected to our product. We believe that food is just too good to be wasted. That's why, in 2020, we launched our Make Taste Not Waste campaign to help people become more resourceful with their food and reduce food waste at home and beyond. As part of this campaign, we've launched the Hellmann's Food Relief Fund, which has saved 1.2 million pounds of food from farms and redistributed it to communities in need. We've also granted funding for ReFed to advance national food waste data and solutions. We've also partnered with advocacy groups in favor of the Food Date Labeling Act, which seeks to make it easier to understand labeling on packaging. And as a consumer-facing brand, consumer-facing initiatives is one of our superpowers. In past years, you will have seen our Make Taste Not Waste message in our big game commercials. And we've also developed and promoted a series of consumer-facing flexible recipes, what we call Flexipes, that make it easy to create delicious meals from the most wasted ingredients in your fridge. Our research shows that when families institute one use-up night, or what we've branded as a fridge night, per week, then household food waste can be reduced by up to 46%. That is a lot of food waste reduction just by one day a week. We also know that we as a business needed to take action, right? We couldn't just ask our consumers to change their behavior. So that's why, at the start of 2024, we decided to partner with the Food Recovery Network to help expand our recovery efforts at some of our signature large-scale brand moments through the year, such as at the big game and at tailgates throughout the football season. To date, we've supported the Food Recovery Network in recovering over 109,000 pounds of surplus food, which equates to over 91,000 meals donated. As the official mayonnaise sponsor of the New England Patriots, Hellmann saw a natural opportunity to connect FRN with the Gillette Stadium team. Gillette Stadium has strong sustainability commitments, which resulted in the large-scale effort that we'll be talking about in today's webinar. Through our tailgate recoveries, we've shown that we can drive actionable and tangible impact by bringing together purpose-led brands, iconic venues, and passionate nonprofits. Hellmann's as a brand is always looking for ways to champion and invest in programs, partnerships, and policy advocacy work to make fighting food waste convenient. I'll let the FRN team and the Gillette Stadium teams share more about the recovery efforts on the ground. But on behalf of Hellmann's, I wanted to say a very big thank you to everyone who helped bring this incredible partnership to life. We're really proud to be part of a team that's making a real, tangible impact in the food recovery space.
Awesome. We can hop on to the next slide. And then just to reiterate how all of these 3 different organizations came together on this initiative. Food Recovery Network and Hellmann's have worked together on many different projects across the country, assisting with food recovery projects at different venues and at different events. And Hellmann's, as Heather mentioned, is one of the New England Patriots sponsors. So that's kind of how we all got connected, and we came together on December 1st for a home Patriots game for this joint activation, really connecting both the venue and the food recovery organization and the sponsor for this great initiative.
And of course, Food Recovery Network really relies on partnerships like the one with Gillette Stadium and Hellmann's to do the work that we do to fulfill our mission. So we're really grateful to have been a part of this, this initiative. Next slide.
In this slide, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the logistics in terms of planning, preparation for our game day recovery in the pickup. What you're looking at now is a map of Gillette Stadium, and many of you may be thinking, okay, great, you recovered a lot of hot dogs, hamburgers, and popcorn, but that's not actually the case. So at Gillette Stadium, we're proud to say that we have all in-house catering, and we offer 6 different premium hospitalities. With that being said, there's a number of hot food items and cold food items that our guests have the ability either to purchase as a part of their package or to gain access to on game day. While we're looking at this map, you really see the main concourse and all of the seating, but interspersed in here, we have a whole bunch of different hospitalities. Some of these may be temporary structures. In our planning, Dina and I went around for about 2 or 3 games prior to December 1st, mapping out what would be feasible for us to recover and what would be out of what we would consider the safe zone for food safety. And excuse me, in partnership with our food safety consultant, we discussed the issue of hot food versus cold food, how long we had to recover the food, the safe temperature zone for these foods, and what we would need to do in planning and executing this event. So as many of you are also aware, there are a lot of people that come to football games. Our stadium can host 68,000 guests on game day. And we are so fortunate that we really do see those numbers on game day. So with a packed stadium, we had to be smart about how we were going to be moving this quantity of food around the stadium. So with our setup, we have a cold holding warehouse that's located on property. Once we figured out the best route to execute from each of these premium hospitality spaces, we set up our, I'll just call it war zone, our area where the students were involved in helping us package, temperature the foods, put labeling on it. All of that was located right next to our cold holding warehouse. And that made it easier to execute as well as to pick up for the Food Recovery Network the next day. We are also proud to say all of our managers that are handling food are Serve Safe certified. So that's a special certification that we get. It's about an 8-hour course that we all have to take, and it helps us to reduce foodborne illness. We'll be speaking we'll touch a little bit on that a little bit later, but when you're donating any sort of food, many of you are familiar with donating canned goods or dry goods. Already prepared foods are a whole different ballgame when it comes to food safety. And we spoke in depth with our food safety consultant in regards to that. The general consensus was that it would be in our best interest, as well as the Food Recovery Network's best interest and the consumer's best interest, that we do not donate any hot food, because the time that it has to cool is very rapidly, and we did not have the equipment to do so. So the piece of equipment that we would need would be a blast chiller, and while we do have those on property, we didn't have the quantity that was needed. So unfortunately, for this game, we were only able to recover a small quantity of hot food, and that was mostly from the tailgate activation. The rest of the food that we recovered were things like deli sandwiches, salads, fruits, cold chicken platters, things of that nature. And in our preparation for this, Dina had gone ahead and already printed out labels for some of the items that we knew we were ready to receive. Some of them we did have to write in by hand, but it was such a huge help to have ready-made labels for us. We went through and we made sure that each of them was accurate in terms of the sell-by date or the best-by date when the consumer should consume the food. We had prior knowledge that our food was going to be consumed within the 2 days following pickup. So we plan to have our best by date for December 3rd. And that was in collaboration with our culinary team. Once again, this all kind of circles back to our Serve Safe certification and preparation of this food. We also made sure to put a disclaimer on all of our donated items for food allergens, as we know that is such a huge issue when serving food, especially with all of the items that may have been prepared off-site, such as breads, pastries, and desserts. And in addition to all of this, we had to procure a large number of thermometers to make sure all of the food that we were donating was safe to donate. So there are specific safety zones for our cold foods that they need to be held within in order for them to be safe to be recovered. So with the help of Dina, the team that Food Recovery Network brought in, and a few of our other colleagues, we made sure that everything was temped and logged. And we're happy to say that we had a really, really positive turnout. I think the number is somewhere upwards of 700 pounds that we were able to recover from our venue on that day. And it wouldn't have been possible without the joint effort of the Food Recovery Network, Dina, Hellmann's, and our colleagues at Gillette Stadium that were willing and able to give us an extra hand on that day. If you can move to the next slide, please.
Yes, it definitely was a team effort all around with all the prep and especially on the day of. On this slide here, we're gonna dive into kind of the labeling station that we had set up. We had a great assembly line going of some students from Brown University, and then later on some of our colleagues from Gillette Stadium helping out as well with the labeling of everything. And we did work with Food Recovery Network to determine as we were going through a couple of the games leading up to the December 1st game to see kind of which packaging materials and how many we might need. So we were able to get all of that situated before the game on December 1st. But once everything came down to this station, which we set up in one of the back corners of the kitchen, we kind of had 5 different steps here, 5 main steps. So kind of opened the lid, determined what it was, was it salad, pasta, sandwiches, and then we had labels, so we could write down what it was there, and then we took the temperature. We were able to use insta reading thermometers, and then we had a probe wipe so we could clean everything in between, and then we recorded everything on a log sheet, and we worked with our food safety consulting company to make sure the log sheets look good, as well as leading into step 3 here, the allergen warning labels, that they approved of that and it looked good from their perspective. And then step 4, we wrote the best by dates. As Catherine mentioned, we ended up doing everything for December 3rd because the game was on the 1st. All the food was going to be picked up the next day on the 2nd. And then the plan was for all the food to be enjoyed on the 3rd. And then here too, we also wrote the item description. So whether it was chicken, salad, fruit, whatever it was. And then at the end, we weighed each pan and recorded it on the log too, so we could have a sense of the quantity of food that we were collecting. But yeah, that was the general overview of the assembly line that we had. And then we'll jump to the next slide to look at some pictures.
Perfect. So here are our student leaders from Brown University who are helping us with the recovery that day. Brown is one of our over 200 student chapters across the country. Most of the time, our students are going into their dining halls, taking their surplus food, and then either dropping it off on campus or to an off-campus nonprofit. So this was really exciting that we kind of had a different opportunity for our students to come join us at Gillette Stadium. So this chapter in specifically, so Brown, they've recovered since 2013 over 125,000 pounds of food, which is really cool. So it's always great when we can have our student experts join us. This past year, they actually had some challenges with receiving surplus food from their dining hall. So they had fewer food recovery opportunities. So this was a really great way to involve them and yes, have some extra hands for our assembly line. Next slide.
Yeah, and these next two slides are some pictures of the food that we actually recovered from the premium spaces. So it kind of came in two waves, kind of before pregame and then postgame. So pregame, we had the leftover food from Hellmann's tailgate. They had an activation in our fan zone area pregame, and they were handing out buffalo chicken dip and some vegetables and like bread chips. So we had a little bit of food left over from there. So that's what you're going to see on the left hand side there. And then one of our premium spaces does a pregame meal. So that was in the Sports Illustrated Pavilion. So those were some pictures of the food that was left over from that, such as chicken, pasta, salad, just to kind of get a visual here and to show the operations of, bringing the racks down to the kitchen, labeling everything, and then putting it back on racks, and then putting it into the cold storage for the evening. And then we can jump to the next slide to look at post game. One of the spaces that we premium spaces that we recovered food from was GP Atrium, one of our spaces on the club level premium spaces. So we brought down a couple of speed racks to the kitchen post game, and we also and that included salads, lots of sandwiches, fruit, and desserts as well. So we had some food left over from there. And then we also had some bread, as you can see on the picture there, and then some bagged salads and peppers left over in the kitchen, which we were able to recover as well and package up for the next morning. And yeah.
So, oh, sorry, Bella, can you go back a slide? Perfect. Thank you. So yes, after we and Gillette packaged up all that food, it was kept in cold storage overnight. And then the next morning, it was transferred over to a nonprofit organization called the Elijah Project. I will say sometimes with food recoveries, right, we're moving that food right after we're done packaging it. Other times when the opportunity presents itself, we can keep it in cold storage overnight, which is always really nice. So in addition to that, when you're setting up a food recovery program, it's really important to connect with the right partner agency. So the Elijah Project had the means to receive, refrigerate, and reserve that pre-prepared food donations. Not all hunger relief or partner agencies, as we call them, are equipped for prepared foods. Sometimes organizations will only accept canned or non-perishable goods. So you always want to double check that the organization can take prepared foods. We also want to make sure that the food we're donating aligns with the community that that organization is serving. So for example, if this is like a faith-based organization or they have like a culturally specific community that they serve, one example is like organizations that only accept halal donations. We want to make sure that we're donating the correct types of food to them. So they were a really great fit for us. And one other last piece is usually food donors, so Gillette Stadium in this instance, right, they can provide insight for a range as to how much surplus food they think there will be at the end of the night. So that's why those those 2 previous games where they were scoping everything out was really important and helpful. So they had an idea as to how much surplus food there may be. This is important for the organization we're dropping the food off to, so we can give them an idea as to how much food they might be receiving, right? We don't have our crystal ball. Sometimes it's different than what we think it's going to be. But it's really important to see, right? Does this organization have one tiny fridge, or in this case, do they have a huge refrigerated truck, which we could fill to the brim? So that was a really great nonprofit organization to work with. And I know, Gillette, you guys work with them in other capacities too as well. Next slide. Cool. So all this talk here is our impact, which was really, really great, right? So those were kind of those logistics. Here's our totals, right? 723 pounds of food recovered. It's always fun to do those comparisons. So this is the size or the weight of a full-grown bull, which was the equivalent of 603 meals donated, and then 0.47 metric tons of carbon dioxide prevented, just from this one event. So it's really important whenever we can do any sort of food recovery, we really are making a difference in the community. Next slide. All right, so some learnings and takeaways, right? Food recovery, such as this one, they require people power. There are people coordinating the food recovery, consulting on best practices, and of course, on the day of the food recovery, we always need people to complete that food recovery itself. I do want to take a moment to speak on liability protection because we mentioned food safety a little bit earlier, and Catherine will touch on that a little bit more in a minute as well. One of the main barriers we see to doing this work is related to the fear of liabilities from food donors. When a group is donating surplus food, there are 2 pieces of federal legislation that make this possible. Essentially, if the group is donating in good faith and follows food safety guidelines, they are covered. Some states even have specific legislation that enhances these protections. What's great with working about Gillette and having professionals in the culinary space is they are experts with food safety, right? They know the food safety standards and how to adhere to them. Additionally, right, I showed you the picture of our Brown students that joined us. They are all food safety trained. They have learned how to handle and transfer that food. And with our partner agency, right, they also had that refrigeration space, excuse me, they had the people power, and they also know the food safety rules and regulations and how to make sure that those prepared food donations are kept at the right temperature and then safely reheated and reserved. So I'll pass it to you, Catherine, to talk about food safety a little more.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that's a trigger phrase at this point, right? But it is just so important because obviously no one wants to be a victim of foodborne illness. So when we're talking about donating food to any group, but particularly with this recovery mission, we wanted to make sure that we were doing everything in our willpower to educate everyone, even those people who work alongside us all the time, but may not have ever been involved in a recovery mission before. So we had in-depth conversation with our culinary team. Our director of culinary was very involved in terms of making sure that we had prepared enough of the recoverable food so that we would have food to donate, because we had come into understanding that we wouldn't be able to donate that hot food like we had previously thought. This all really happened about maybe a week out from the game. We realized, oh my gosh, we accounted for all of this hot food that we thought we would be able to recover. Another big thing that our food safety consultant had brought up, and we had spoken about in previous conversations with Food Recovery Network, was to stay away from donating shellfish and dairy because of the extreme allergens that are associated with those 2 main food groups. So for us, what that meant was, 1, making sure that everyone was safely handling the food. I know in some of the photos you had seen folks with gloves, but there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes, making sure everyone was following their best practices, washing their hands before donning gloves, washing their hands after taking their gloves off, switching their gloves when they're touching a different food substance. We had people who were strictly just labeling, while others could handle the actual trays of food themselves. we also made sure that we were very cognizant of how long the food had been out. So any food that is on display for guest consumption is deemed as non-recoverable because of the potential for any airborne illness. So all of this food that was recovered had never seen the guests. It had never gone on the game day floor, you could say. It was all kept in the back of the house and all kept properly to temperature. So that's just a little insight into the food safety. And, you know, as Julie had mentioned, we do take our Serve Safe certification very seriously here because really all it takes is one misstep and then we can have a lot of really sick people. And that's something that no one ever wants to happen. So we're very proud and we take it with the utmost seriousness when we're discussing food safety, as well as just handling ourselves with all of like our proper protocols and washing our hands, making sure that anyone who's feeling ill is not on the floor, is not handling food. Gillette Stadium is really great in giving us those learnings and empowering all of our leaders to share those learnings with all of our team members. Dina, if you want to talk, I know I kind of stole your thunder talking about gloves, but fixing all of the stuff that we really had to have to make this mission a success.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, just adding on to like all the other logistics that come into play too in prepping for the day of the food recovery. You mentioned like making sure everybody washes their hands, has gloves, so like making sure we had enough gloves for all the staff and extra gloves, making sure we had labels to put on the racks of food that were stored overnight. So if somebody was doing an overnight shift and was like, oh, what's this food doing here? Making sure that we had, over communicate is better than under communication. So we had signs that we put on the racks of food overnight in the storage. And then even just collecting the cardboard boxes you saw in the picture in the of the food in the truck that we packaged everything up the next morning in cardboard boxes for transportation, just even making sure that we saved those boxes the day before so that we could use them the next day. All those little things that come into play when you're trying to collect so much food. Just a lot of things to be aware of, but yeah. Next slide. Awesome. Yeah. All right. Thank you, everybody.
I just want to point out we have some Q&A questions. I know that's where we're headed, but just letting y'all know. I don't know if you can see it on your end, but I can see it.
I'll go ahead and read it out loud. Was this a one-day donation effort or is it ongoing? Was there a consideration of potential partnership between the vendors to have them take on some of these responsibilities, or is that a future goal? We'll say, Food Recovery Network had an ongoing relationship with Hellmann's for a number of fall football activations. They had tailgates where they were serving food, and Food Recovery Network attended food recoveries across the country in order to support that. With Gillette, oh, and I'll go ahead and let Dina or Catherine, you go.
I'll touch just quickly on the vendors. So because we provide all of our catering in-house, we do have partnerships with vendors. However, they're large group vendors. For example, like Performance Food Group supplies a lot of our product and a few others. In this case, they're not directly involved on game days with us. They'll make the deliveries the week of game day, even the morning of. But once it comes onto our property, it then becomes our responsibility to serve. So for like future consideration of games, we would continue to do the like quote unquote heavy lifting of getting that food to Food Recovery Network. But in the off chance that we have the ability to partner with another vendor in the future or a corporate sponsor, we're more than willing to discuss those potentials and those opportunities because it's such a valuable thing for our communities.
Yeah, and then just adding on, I think part of the question was this a kind of a one-time thing for us or more of a permanent program that we have at the stadium? We've done a couple different food recoveries. This was, I believe, our biggest one that we've done to date. But we don't currently have a full time permanent program, but definitely something that we're looking into to see how we can build on the learnings in the future.
There's an addition from Sarah that says, to clarify, could existing service staff assist in the food donation responsibilities? Sorry, may have confused you with the term vendor.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so to kind of touch on that, for us in the stadium, the way our culinary team will determine ratios for the group, we're very fortunate. We do events 365 days a year, even though we are an open air stadium. We have a number of spaces in which we can host guests. So it's not just game day that we're looking at to recover food from. When we are working any sort of event, game day or private events, there is food that is deemed not recoverable. One, it may have been in hot holding for too long. So food is deemed not recoverable if it's been in hot holding for over 4 hours. That begins the moment that it goes onto the grill. So if it gets grilled off, starts minute 0. For us, once we receive it, it's about an hour in to its quote unquote life. It'll then be presented to the guest for another 90 minutes. And usually right around the time that we're ready to wrap up the event, we're at our 4-hour mark. So any food that is left in the hot box is deemed unsafe for us to then donate. In terms of cold food, if it has not been put out on the floor, it will then get brought back to our main kitchen, in which they may repurpose it for things like an employee lunch or a family meal for our culinary staff, or it very well could be one of those instances where it's something that is unable to be recovered. And then in that instance, we do have what we would call a green bin. And so in our stadium, we use that to help with our sustainability mission. So we have a renewable energy commitment here at Gillette Stadium, and our food waste is used to help renew energy. And Dina, if you want to kind of squeeze in there, you can speak a little bit more about that because you know more logistically how that process works. But we have a dedicated team on site that will take our food waste and then put it into the system that Dina is going to just touch briefly on.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so the program that we have, the food grinder program that we have is called Grind to Energy. So basically it's this sink that food scraps, leftovers from the kitchens, from the suites, premium spaces, can get put into this sink, and then it gets mixed in with water and then put into this big holding tank that we have on campus. And basically that's a slurry of food and water mixed together. And then once it's full, it gets pumped out to a farm in Western Mass. And that farm has an anaerobic digester. So the food waste is turned into fertilizer as well as electricity. So kind of creating that circularity and giving new life, if you will, to the food scraps left over from the stadium.
Thank you.
There's a couple more questions. Julia, maybe you could answer this one. How did you find the organization to donate it to? How far in advance did you make this planning?
For sure. So I would say we normally start searching for an organization around a month or 4 weeks before. Usually you can have a pretty good sense on your city or where you're at, if there's a lot of nonprofits that can take food or if there are really just a few key players, right? So here we looked about maybe a month before we were going to do the recovery. then we kind of reached out maybe the week after. So we normally only reach out to organizations a few weeks before. Sometimes there's a lot of turnover at these organizations. And if you're talking to one person, you might be talking to like a top manager, who then day of, you're looking to see who's that main contact that you're going to talk to that will meet you, and who's going to open the door of the truck or the building or whatever it is. So normally we do it a little bit more, a little less planning, right? And a little more like right before. We found that actually works out the best, and it gets us in the right hands. So
Great. And then here's another question. And this is probably for Dina and Catherine. How did you predict how much would be wasted beforehand? Oh, and then also, Julia, how many volunteers do you have? So that's a two-parter.
Great question. So I think initially Dina and I, to be honest, thought we were going to be able to recover more than we actually were able to recover. A few things came into play there. I think that we may have had like our rose-colored glasses on, and we're like, oh my gosh, we can donate all of these things, not taking into consideration what the organization may want to be donated. So, you know, while we may have 30 bags of popcorn doesn't really hold that well. And it certainly is not something that you can refrigerate. And it's really not a main food group. So while we may have a ton of excess popcorn, it's not exactly a really good donatable food for us. With that coming into play too, it does contain nuts at our stadium. We do cook in corn and coconut oil, so that is considered a nut oil. That was something that we really tried strongly to stay away from, because that is another major allergen for us. And so when Dina and I were going around 2 to 3 games before and looking at all the premium spaces, we were looking logistically at, okay, this temporary space is actually not even attached to our stadium. The truck that we use to move it, as soon as it comes back to the loading dock, is getting unloaded as fast as it can, and it's getting reloaded as fast as it can, and it's going away. And all of this food is questionable at that point now, because we don't know how long our service staff may have had it outside. Maybe it was too hot, maybe it was too cold, it didn't get properly cooled, it wasn't properly stored. So that was one that we weren't really able to keep our eyes on. And that was one of our temporary structures that we kind of just crossed off right away. And then every game is a little bit different, right? So we recovered in the beginning of December. Well, we had, if I remember right, 3 November games. And each of those November games had a very different turnout for guests. One of them was warm weather and everyone was excited. It was kind of like hometown rival. So we had a lot of guests on October 27th. And then the next game, it wasn't really like that popular of a game. So we didn't have that many guests. So the projections looked a little higher for food recovery. And then right before Thanksgiving, we had another game in which we thought, okay, this is kind of middle of the road, and this is what we could see our next game looking like, because it was sandwiched right in between Thanksgiving. So to be honest, the projection was kind of, you know, taking the median of this is the most that we think we can recover, this is the least we think we can recover, and okay, I think we feel good if we go somewhere in the middle with that. I know that we had asked for an exorbitant amount of pans and lids just in case. For us at the stadium, we do a kind of like a pre-con meeting with everyone in the stadium about a week out from the game, or really that week of the game, talking about, okay, this is how many tickets were purchased, this is how many guests we're expecting, this is how many tickets are left on the market for the game, this is how many guests we have coming into our suites, this is how many guests we have coming into our premium spaces. And in that consideration, we're able to logistically think about how much food may be recovered. The menu also changes week to week. So maybe one Sunday game day, an item was super popular. We try something out the next game day and it's not quite as popular, resulting in more leftover food. So I'm not a betting woman, but it was all about kind of guessing and gambling at that point and what we thought we would be able to recover.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, I was just going to add, I feel like, yeah, it's very hard to predict, especially in such a large stadium. On our end, it was really just helpful to see, right, how big of a truck do we need and how much space do we need at the nonprofit. So normally food donors, right, who take that time, which was great to check out all of those places, can tell us, right, you might need a semi truck or you might need a U-Haul, right? Like we're just looking for kind of those general things. And then to answer that, how many volunteers did you have? We had 7 FRN student volunteers with us, which made the assembly line really fast. I'll say I know Dina had lots of people collecting the food and moving it and bringing it to us. Most of the time on food recoveries in smaller areas, you really only need like 5 or so people. But this time, you know, we had a lot of food, so we had some extra hands.
Yeah, definitely power numbers for sure. It was great to have the students with us for that time, and then we were able to pull some other coworkers to assist us later. But sorry, Catherine, did you want to add something else?
I was just going to say I had about 5 of my managers working on this behind the scenes, just helping to get the food over. And then kind of after hours, the closing out post game, we had about another 5 of us doing that. So I'd say all in for the whole day, we had, 17 to 20 volunteers helping with this mission.
Okay, so there is another question. Do we have time for another question? Sarah Coates asks, thank you for all your great work. This is amazing. I'm curious about if you have any conversations about the upstream prevention for food recovery, especially for foods that cannot be donated. Do you have any purchasing protocols, etc., and what the future might look like?
Yeah, that is a great question. Dina, do you want to go first and I'll build off of you?
Sure. Yeah, I was going to say, I know our food and beverage team, and Catherine can definitely speak more to this, is great about where we're purchasing foods from, trying to source locally when possible, but, depending on the season and the time of year, local foods might not be as accessible. And then just trying to order foods that have less waste, like maybe something comes pre-cut or something, so that everything that we're getting on site, we're able to use as much of it as possible. But yeah, I'll turn it over to you, Catherine, if you want to add anything else.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. That was, one part of what I was going to say. But in addition to the 68,000 fans we have on game day, we also bring in about 2,000 employees. And so as part of Gillette's mission and our statement, food is love. We feed everyone. So there's no exception. We feed our staff as well. A lot of the food that, like, let's say it's 4 hours holding and we can't recover it in terms of donating it, that will then turn into a staff meal immediately. So we're feeding 700 of our parking attendants. We're feeding all of our, concessions, all of those workers that are on the line. We're feeding all of our premium servers, all of our club staff. We're feeding all of our security guards. So we try to minimize waste in every way that we can. And to Dina's point, the chef is very cognizant, our director of culinary is very cognizant in where we are sourcing our goods. So I know all of our meats and our seafoods are locally sourced. And when it comes to produce, we do try our best to, when possible, source things that are already pre-cut, to eliminate some extra waste and to find a way to use those things, right? We already have our preset menus for a lot of our private events. However, the chefs are always playing around with different things that they can do, whether that turns into a garnish or something of the like. We do our best to eliminate food waste. And the food that does have to be wasted will go into the grinder system that we have on property.
The last question that I have in the queue is actually, I think, just a question to reiterate a little bit more about the grinder system. It's a food like popcorn. Do you end up sending it to compost? And I know Dina talked about that a little bit, but maybe you could just touch on that again.
Yeah.
Where does food go that's not recoverable for humans?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So the grind to energy, our food grinder system, is able to take pretty much anything, like popcorn. We basically, because you're able to put in the water that's injected into the system, and you can like mix in different types of foods together so it doesn't clog up the system. You know, like for example, you don't want to put a bunch of bread in it and then not enough water and then it'll clog up. But we have a variety of food that we can put in to the system post game. It's definitely a big endeavor. We have a great group of folks in our food and beverage department that kind of oversee the grind to energy program, but it's a great thing that we've had for years and it's been working really well in terms of being able to divert that food that can't be recoverable.
I have never seen them turn away a single item from the grinder. So they're
Mhm.
obviously we sort through for any trash, you know, a napkin, any wrappers, plastic cups or paper cups or anything of the like. But when it comes to food waste, every single scrap that's able to go in there does go in there.
Great. And then Julia, I see that you're answering the question about, can you touch on hot food donations a bit more? Do you find that there is more food waste in cold or hot?
For sure. I didn't know you guys could see me typing in the Q&A. So I would say generally with prepared foods, we see more hot foods go to waste because it is a little trickier with those temperatures. But I think the number one food that is wasted is actually produce, like across the board. So hot foods are not the largest problem everywhere, right? But with prepared foods, it is normally more with hot foods. I would say with donations, there are, right, those food safety kind of specific standards. There's this temperature danger zone, which is between 40 degrees and 140 degrees Fahrenheit. So the food like can't be within that range for more than 2 hours. So when we're doing food recoveries, we try to do it just as fast as possible. And Catherine kind of mentioned this earlier. When you have hot foods, you want to bring it down to that below 40 degrees with those flash freezers as soon as you can. So it's really important to get them into refrigeration as soon as possible. So that's why hot foods is a little bit trickier, but we have food recoveries a lot of the time that are with hot foods. It's just tricking at a really, really large scale. So
Thank you. I think that there are no more questions. I don't see any more in the chat. And it looks like there are no more in Q&A. So I guess from all of us, I'll start off the thank yous for attending.
Awesome.
Yeah, this has been
Yes,
wonderful.
thank you, everybody.
Thank you for attending. And we look forward to more partnerships with Food Recovery Network and Hellmann's in the future.
Yeah, and if anyone is curious about the work that Food Recovery Network does on a regular basis, you can go ahead and visit foodrecoverynetwork.org. And there's a lot of information on there and even guides, how-to guides.
Wonderful.
Okay.
thank you,
That's a wrap.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.